So human trafficking kind of just fell in my lap. It wasn't something that I necessarily chose to do in the beginning. I was working internet crimes against children, which was child exploitation cases that happened over the internet. And my boss came to me at the time, and he said, "Hey, we've noticed that human trafficking has migrated from, the girls working the corner of the streets to the internet. An example would be Backpage, and you're the internet guy." And he also said, you also have experience with interviewing and talking to and working with victims of sexual assault. He said, my guys don't. And so, hey, prostitution, human trafficking, all that now belongs to you, on top of, the child pornography and child exploitation cases. So it kind of got thrown in my lap at first. And then as I started working it really became, it turned into a passion pretty quickly. And it really all kind of happened. Honestly, I was sitting in church, and I had not long been given the responsibility of trafficking, and my pastor preached a sermon on John chapter 8, the woman that was caught in the act of adultery, and how she was dragged into the middle, the town, and people were gonna stone her to death. And the takeaway that we're taught in Sunday school from that story is, whoever's without sin, throw the first stone. And it's kind of where this story ends in Sunday school. And once we hit that takeaway, and what I learned, or kind of what God revealed to me through that story as an adult, was, hey, that's not where it ended. Like where it ends is, Christ bends down, reaches out to this girl or this woman, and really shows love and compassion beyond dropping the stone and walking away. And so that's when it kind of hit me that, hey, these women are victims, and I've got to do more than just drop the stone and walk away. Like, I've got to take that extra step. And so I saw that actually unfold in front of me when one of the very first rescues we did, the survivor was sitting on the bed in the hotel room, just broken and crying and, feeling dirty, not just on the inside, but the outside, and, embarrassed and ashamed. And I remember sitting down. I had no idea what to say, but I remember sitting down on the bed next to her, and I just reached out and put my arm, around her shoulders. And in my mind, I saw John chapter 8 kind of playing out. Jesus reached down and wasn't afraid to get the dirt of this woman on him, And what was really cool about that was that she, whether she knew it or not, she saw John chapter 8 in that moment too, because, later on talking with her, she experienced somebody who wasn't judgmental, somebody who didn't look at her and go, "Oh, you're so dirty," and also she experienced a loving touch from a man that didn't want anything in return. It was a safe touch, and that's something she had not felt in a long time. And so, kind of from that moment on, I was like, this is what I'm called to do, and it just kind of went from there. When I left law enforcement back in 2017, and we've stayed with it. Now we do it as a private agency and as a nonprofit, but the passion's still there, whether I'm wearing a badge or not.
Are you seeing a big need for this in Tennessee?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And even in my hometown of Jackson, I was telling someone the other day, people call me all the time that come in from out of town, and they say, "Hey, where's a good hotel to stay in Jackson?" And I really have to think really hard, because there's not many here that we haven't run an operation out of, that we haven't witnessed trafficking happening at those hotels. And so it's really bad, especially with Interstate 40 running basically cuts Tennessee in half, and so it connects all the major cities. So Jackson, Memphis, Chattanooga, all of them. The traffickers just have a circuit, and they go from major city to major city, trafficking these women and children and men. And so um, it's bad nationwide, but I personally get to see it in Tennessee.
So can you give me two cases of people that you've rescued or things that you've seen that, the audience would be interested in knowing?
Yeah, sure. So I've got two that I'll share today, and they're two totally different types of cases. And one actually does not have a happy ending, which happens, can happen when working these cases. They don't all end happily. The first one, there was a local girl from West Tennessee that had been missing for a few weeks, and we contacted the local law enforcement agency there and asked if we could assist. And I knew the guys there from my career in law enforcement, and so I met with the lead case agent and looked at the case file. And there were some circumstances that suggested that she could possibly be trafficked. So that local agency was they were working the case from the angle or perspective of a homicide, and we were working it from a possible trafficking angle. And we worked on that case for weeks. We hit all the local hotspots where trafficking occurs and made contact with lots of people, interviewed lots of people. We had people that said they'd seen her, 2-3 days ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so we really worked on that one. And turns out she was recovered. She had been killed. We still don't know to this day if it was a result of trafficking or some other reason. They still don't know who did it. And so that was one where it's easy to get discouraged because you always in your mind think, could we have done more? Could we have gone out one more night? Could we have stayed out a couple of hours longer? Could we have talked to one more person that might have known something? So it's really easy to get discouraged when you have those bad outcomes. But hopefully one day, we can help law enforcement, figure out who perpetrated this so that we can at least bring the family some closure and some peace about it.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is a little different. We were contacted by the survivor, and the survivor had been exploited online for about 10 years by the same perpetrator. The survivor had just gotten the courage to really address the problem. And so I'm also a certified forensic interviewer, and so we knew that we needed to do an interview with this survivor. And so we did the interview, and then we did some technical forensic things with her social media to kind of recover that evidence so that we could start tracing back and identify who this guy is. And we eventually reached a point where we did discover some of the images and things that had been sent back and forth. And she was underage in those photos. So at that point, we had to stop and involve law enforcement at that time because, we could no longer legally possess that evidence. Mm-hmm. And so law enforcement got involved with us at that point in time, and they've kind of taken the lead on that one. Mm-hmm. And that's still an active case. The perpetrator is not from our state, Tennessee, but they're actively pursuing him. But that one had a really good outcome because that survivor had dealt with that pressure of just the constant exploitation online, like I said, for about 10 years, and was ready to move on with her life and just didn't know how, and didn't have the support system to move forward. Her parents didn't know, and so through coming forward and disclosing that and us helping her process all of this, she's built a better relationship with her family, with her parents. So things are looking really good for her. Um, the only thing that she's currently still, kind of hanging out there unresolved is, the prosecution of this perpetrator. And so we're confident law enforcement is going to do the right thing and solve the case and pick this guy up.
What can you tell parents to look for if a child is going to either leave home or if there's signs of there is human trafficking going on? Is there anything that you can help parents to understand?
So a couple of big things that parents can look for are changes in behavior. And I don't mean little normal teenage changes in behavior. They're kind of 180-degree changes in behavior. So, for instance, if you have a teenager or child that's very extroverted and outgoing and loves to be around people, and then now all of a sudden they're very reclusive. They come home, they go to their room and stay to themselves, or they don't participate in conversation at the dinner table, and then also vice versa from that. You could have had a very introverted child, and now all of a sudden they're very extroverted. And usually when you see that role reversal, you'll start to see changes in physical appearance. So the way they dress changes. And again, not slightly, radically. These are radical changes. If you see your child with electronic devices that you didn't purchase, or really anything that you didn't purchase, a common technique of grooming, that's the process that we call when the perpetrator or the abuser or trafficker is trying to lure the child into trafficking. They go through what we call the grooming process. And so one of those techniques in the grooming process is providing the child with gifts. So we would see a lot of times where, a child would run away or go missing. And one of the first things we do is we ask the parents, can we search the child's room? And we'll find things hidden all over the room that the parents didn't purchase, whether it be jewelry or a cell phone or some way of communicating with the child that the parents don't know. I remember one case where the perpetrator had mailed the victim a SIM card, so that when the two of them talked, what the victim would do would take her SIM card out, put the one that the perpetrator sent her into the phone, so that they could talk and it not show up on mom and dad's phone bill. So these guys are really smart, and but to sum all of that up, very simply, is look for radical behavior and appearance changes in your children.
So what should a parent do if their child leaves? I mean, do they have to wait like 24 hours and then contact investigators, or do they contact you immediately, or how does that work?
Yeah, so if they're underage, well, first let me say this: if anybody goes missing, contact law enforcement immediately. Now, law enforcement's response is going to be different depending on whether it's someone under 18 or over 18. Under 18, you're going to get an immediate response. I think if they're an adult, it's 24 to 48 hours before they'll do much with that. Mm-hmm. But definitely contact law enforcement right away. And then if you could also choose to contact an organization like 731 Rescue as well as law enforcement, or if you have a similar organization in your community, you can never tell enough people that your child's missing. The more people looking, the better. But yes, certainly don't hesitate to call. The national statistic right now is 1 out of every 6 runaways ends up being trafficked. And so, and the reason for that is it's not necessarily that the child ran away because they had been in contact with a trafficker. They may run away because they're being bullied at school, or they don't like something mom and dad made them do. But when they get out on the street, that's how they survive. Mm-hmm. So in order to eat and in order to have clothing and shelter, someone has to provide that to them, to a 15-year-old that's run away. And that's typically the trafficker. That's usually when they come into contact with with them.
Okay. Is there anything that you would like people to know?
The number one thing I would like people to know is that trafficking is happening all over the United States. This is not a foreign or third world problem. It is happening here in the United States. It's happening in your state, and it's happening in your hometown, right in your backyard. There's no socioeconomic status that is immune from this. It affects all walks of life. And, matter of fact, the United States is the number one consumer of human trafficking in the world. And so a lot of people don't know that. The more people we talk to, it's kind of a distant problem that's arm's length. They know what trafficking is. They don't like it. They want it to end, but they don't realize how close to home it really, truly is.
For more information, go to their website at 731investigations.com.